Ladies and gentlemen, this evening on the Air Raid Hour, we are breaking down all the Buffalo Bills news from today, including a Deion Dawkins extension, the re-signing of Cam Lewis and AJ Epinesa, the loss of Gabriel Davis and Mitch Morse to Jacksonville, Leonard Floyd to San Francisco, the downfall of the Miami Dolphins. We are going to relish in that a little bit, talk a little New England Patriots and New York Jets as well. Essentially, we're just going to go around the horn in the NFL tonight and talk all things Buffalo Bills and free agency. But first,
welcome to the Air Raid Hour, a Cover One Network podcast. Here are your hosts, Judge Mathis and Tilt Money.
welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to the Air Raid Hour. Dave, long time no see, right?
Couple hours.
Cover One has had you covered all day in free agency. We started at noon today, and we're going to go all the way through to the end of the show. So maybe Brandon Beane after dark. We are going to we're freestyling today. You notice there's no graphic at the bottom, really like telling us which segment we're going to do next, because the Buffalo Bills and Brandon Beane could strike at any minute. I know the last couple of minutes we were talking, Chase Edmonds goes back to the Buccaneers. Gross Matos goes to the San Francisco 49ers. He got himself a nice little bag. So moves are happening. Moves will keep happening, and we will react over the course of the evening. But we're going to start with the Buffalo Bills and what the Buffalo Bills have done today. And what the Buffalo Bills have done today is they have taken care and continue to take care of business on their own end. They have base salary restructured Josh Allen. They have extended Gabriel Davis for 3 seasons. They have re-signed AJ Epinesa for 2 years, up to $20 million. Really, it's about a 2-year, $14 million deal with incentives. And they have re-signed Cam Lewis for 2 years, $4 million. Dave, react to the moves that the Buffalo Bills made today before we get into some of the guys the Bills lost.
Just your Freudian slip on the Gabe Davis 3 years. It was Deion Dawkins.
Dawkins, 3 years. My bad. It's been a day.
It's been a long day for you. What is this, like your 7th hour of coverage today?
This would be my 7th hour, yeah.
I think given the cap situation the Bills were in, right? And we knew these flurry of moves that were kind of leading up to today. Some were surprises. Obviously, Mitch Morse, like that was a surprise, that cut. But others like Jordan Poyer and Nyheim Hines and Deontay Hardy, a lot of those like could have been telegraphed. And so what the Bills did today was really about taking care of their own housekeeping, right, in-house. And that was namely through the extension to Deion Dawkins, which we all thought was coming. It makes sense. He's age 30. He's been one of the best left tackles in the league statistically. He's been healthy. The advanced analytics like Deion Dawkins as far as him as a pass blocker. It obviously makes sense, not to mention the locker room effect he's had, the community effect he's had. So it goes beyond just the play on the field for Deion Dawkins. He is a staple in the locker room. He's going to be there for when the Bills open their new stadium in a couple years. So it just makes sense. And then AJ Epinesa was the one we weren't really sure. Would he be back? Would he not? Would the Bills maybe be able to bring back one of Leonard Floyd or AJ Epinesa? We see Leonard Floyd actually getting more money than AJ Epinesa from the 49ers. And the Bills getting AJ Epinesa back at what I believe is a really, really great deal for the Bills. It's a good deal for Epinesa on his trajectory that he was on to kind of continue to play in this system that he's developed in. And by the way, a good chance that he's going to maybe be the main, maybe the early down starter for this team opposite of Greg Rousseau coming into next year. We don't know yet. So it's looking like that is a possibility. And so the Bills really in-house taking care of business. You mentioned the Josh Allen restructure gives them some room to play with, and we'll see if that equates to any more moves here throughout the course of the night. But we always thought it could be a potential less splashy type of first day, but really some important foundational moves here now for the Bills with Epinesa and Dawkins.
Yeah, the Epinesa one sticks out the most to me. Obviously, Deion Dawkins, it opens up a can of worms now because you have Spencer Brown, who is going to need a new contract at the end of next season. Probably going to want to see him and have him prove it on the field for 2 consecutive years. Also prove he can stay healthy for 2 consecutive years because he's had those back issues. But a whole new can of worms now opens up with how do you pay this offensive line now that this offensive line, or hopefully this offensive line, will give you 2 straight years of consistency. We'll see how next season goes. The AJ Epinesa one was the big one to me, and I know Adam Pencil on Twitter, part of the Cover One community here, one of our contributors. He had some really nice statistics, some advanced statistics on AJ Epinesa. He had 2 tweets that he riled out today that I shared. I really liked. He said, "For those of you who aren't moved by the AJ Epinesa retention, you should know that out of all the defensive ends with a minimum of 20 pressures in 2023, Epinesa ranked 8th in sack percentage. He's up there with some big names, including Parsons, Bosa, and Garrett. In SIS's points saved per rush, he ranked 4th in 2024. Only TJ Watt, Trey Hendrickson, and Myles Garrett were better. He's earned more snaps, and I think the team is going to give that to him." As you mentioned, I think we are in for AJ Epinesa seeing an increase in his snap share. I think he will be the starter at right end opposite the left end in Gregory Rousseau. And I
Mhm.
think we'll see him earn a lot of these incentives that are going to push him towards $20 million mark. It took him a while. He maybe lost a little bit too much weight. It took him a little too long to transform the body the way the Buffalo Bills wanted to. Then you have some injuries that have afflicted him. It looked like he was really coming on last season, and then he made a play that really helped us out in that Chiefs game late in the
Mhm.
season. And then he got hurt, and I don't think he was the same the rest of the season. If not for that injury, maybe he pushes double-digit sacks. Maybe he's not even an option to come back to Buffalo because he's hitting the market and signing with somebody else. So I think that injury maybe saved AJ Epinesa's career in Buffalo by making him continually affordable to come back here. And I think that it might pay dividends for the Buffalo Bills heading into the future because I'm really excited to see him lining up across from Gregory Rousseau. Both of them, Rousseau 23, Epinesa will be 26 when the year starts. So they still got a lot of miles left on the tires from both of their starting edge rushers.
Yeah, and they continue, right? Whatever you want to say about Von Miller and kind of what your expectations were
Mhm.
for him last year, both of those guys continue to kind of be able to learn under Von's guidance. Obviously, neither one of those guys is an exact sort of um, physical sort of archetype match to what Von is, but he's able to kind of maybe help those guys a bit along in their pass rush
Mhm.
repertoire. So I think the Bills have 2 really good young foundational pieces there in Rousseau and Epinesa, and now let's see if Von Miller can come back and offer something in the pass rush capacity, much like what we were expecting last year and what Leonard Floyd was able to fill. Or what Leonard Floyd, AJ Epinesa, and Greg Rousseau brought to the table last year as a combination of those 3. You'd like to think another,
Mhm.
several months removed. Von Miller, obviously, with his contract situation being
Yeah.
reworked and a chip maybe on his shoulder, then that 3-man rotation of what we
Mhm.
envisioned with, or what we had with Floyd, Epinesa, and Groot can be the same with Von Miller,
Yeah.
Epinesa, and Groot.
And you got to hope that AJ turns the corner and continues to develop even more. That would be awesome. And then the issue I have with Von Miller is Von Miller, apparently a lot of the reason why he restructured the contract is because if you get suspended, your guarantees go out the window. So he was going to lose possibly those guarantees because apparently there are some in Von Miller's camp who are afraid that the NFL will suspend him under the league's personal conduct policy. So the Buffalo Bills cannot be done at this edge rusher position. They need more bodies there.
Yes,
I
agreed.
would bring Shaq Lawson back. I think that's a no-brainer on a 1-year minimal contract. But let's take a look at what the Buffalo Bills have here at edge rusher now. They got 5 guys: Rousseau, Epinesa, Von Miller. If you weren't concerned about Von Miller's suspension and maybe you were pretty confident in him just being able to replicate what Leonard Floyd did, perhaps you just go to the draft to address and add another guy, and maybe Kingsley Jonathan or Cameron Klein, they step up into a larger role next year. Leonard Floyd is obviously in San Francisco, so he's no longer an option. The Bills, if they don't really sign anyone in free agency, could get possibly a 5th round compensatory pick because of the deal that Leonard Floyd signed. And I'll tell you what, I look out in free agency and I'm just not that impressed. Gross Matos is now off the board. He signed with the San Francisco 49ers. I know Jadeveon Clowney is out there. I don't think the Bills have that kind of money, and I think he's going to be earmarked for Seattle and Mike McDonald. There really aren't many pass rushers out there that float the boat for me more than, say, a Shaq Lawson would. Maybe they added James Smith-Williams, or maybe they added Casey Toohill. But really, nothing crazy out there. I don't think the Bills have a crazy amount of money either. I think the next edge addition is either going to be Shaq Lawson or the draft.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think one name that could be interesting, right, is Emmanuel Ogbah, who was released by
Yes,
the
that's true.
Dolphins,
Mhm.
and maybe a surprise release, and a guy that 2 years ago we were touting as a possible splashy signing for this Bills
Mhm.
team. And obviously he went to Miami at that time. Now times have changed. Certainly he's age 30 now and has lost a step, but in the kind of same vein as like we used to always talk about with like Melvin Ingram and those types, like Emmanuel
Mhm.
Ogbah is now a free agent. Dolphins release him, wouldn't count against the comp pick formula. Not sure what kind of market he will have. Maybe he has a little bit of a market because the rest of the edge free agent class is not great. And unless you're maybe in the top 15, 20 picks of this draft, like it's going to be hard to really bank on getting a premium edge rusher stud in this draft class without taking some risks. So it will be interesting to see how the rest of this plays out. And that's why I think that the bringing back Epinesa,
Yeah.
I don't, I wonder if the Bills pivoted or if it was like their plan to bring them back all along. Now we'll get some
Mhm.
press conference from Brandon Beane that says we wanted to bring AJ back all along. But
Yeah.
I wonder if that wasn't the plan A and it just happened to fall that way. So either way, I don't care. I'm happy he's back. And you're right. We do need to add, I think, one more.
Mhm. And what I do like too is the fact that I mentioned Gregory Rousseau is 23 and AJ Epinesa is 26. So I know that the Buffalo Bills do like to rotate, but if they do find themselves in a situation where they have to have these workhorse edges, those two guys are young enough where they can take a lot of snaps in 2024. They can be out on the field a lot. So even though the Buffalo Bills do like to rotate and you would like to add names to that rotation, these are two guys who I think can be workhorses for you on the edge in AJ Epinesa and Gregory Rousseau. Transitioning now to some of the guys the Buffalo Bills have lost today. We mentioned Leonard Floyd going to San Francisco, 2 years, $20 million. It could be a fifth round comp pick in return. Gabriel Davis heads to Jacksonville. The number was pretty gaudy at first, 3 years, $50 million. Turns out to be 3 years, $39 million with incentives. So that is a compensatory pick of about a fourth round pick for the Buffalo Bills if they don't go out and screw with that formula by signing free agents. And Mitch Morse signed with the Jacksonville Jaguars as well. Those are the three notable Buffalo Bills who are no longer Buffalo Bills and cannot return to the Buffalo Bills this season because they have signed elsewhere. What are your thoughts on Davis, Morse, and Floyd leaving?
Well, I think Floyd, look, I love what Floyd brought to this team last year. Obviously, first guy with double digit sacks on the Bills for several years, right? And he is a big loss. I thought he faded a little bit down the stretch last year. There might have been a lingering injury there that maybe kind of, you know, halted his play maybe a bit at the end. But look, he said at the end of the season during, the locker room interviews, and I can't remember if it was with Dan or someone else who was interviewing him. And he said, "Look, I'm going to go where the money is." And he got that 2-year, $24 million deal from the Niners and a contending team. So can you really blame the guy for doing that? The Bills were not going to, and as Dylan says here, 1 sack in his last 8 games, and that's kind of what I was getting to. Like down the stretch, he wasn't there. But of course, very appreciative for what Leonard Floyd was able to bring to the table to this Bills team last year, filling in for Von Miller. The Bills were never going to give him that kind of money, right? And I thought that AJ Epinesa would get more money than Leonard Floyd. So, hey, good job on the Bills to get AJ Epinesa, a younger player,
Mhm.
back on the rise, who I think has a better trajectory at this point. But look, the 49ers are obviously in a situation where they want to add some guys to kind of replace like an Eric Armstead. So fine. Gabe Davis, I don't think the Bills were going to pay that much either for his services. I think that was even without the incentive number baked in, that was a pretty steep number. The $13 million, that's pre-incentive number a year. If you talk about the 39 million total, 13 million AAV pre-incentive, that's steep, I think, for this Bills team. I think that you're looking at this draft, you have 11 picks, you have this cap situation that you're in. You really need to be strategic with where you're investing your assets. If I'm the Bills, I'm looking at this wide receiver draft class. I saw what Khalil Shakir did at the end of last season. I had Dawson Knox and Dalton Kincaid still. I have Stephon Diggs. I have James Cook. I think the Bills probably thought we can prioritize wide receiver in the draft or elsewhere. Mitch Morse is the one to me that I think, and we talked about this earlier when we were live, that's the one where you probably could have given Mitch like a slight pay cut and he would have come back for 1 year, right? The money he got from Jacksonville was probably less than what he could have got on an AAV standpoint from taking a little bit of a pay cut from the Bills this year. But the Bills just decided, rip the Band-Aid off. Let's save all of that money. And he goes to Jacksonville, which is a little bit of a disappointment given that relationship Josh has with Mitch and how important he's been in the pivot there. That's the one where I think you could make the case that maybe the Bills should have kept him and maybe just see if he would take a slight pay cut. But it's not how it works out all the time. So I hope nothing but the best for him. But that's really the only one where I would say, man, would have been kind of nice if we still had him in the mix.
It's interesting, right? Because it seems like the Buffalo Bills are zigging while everyone else is zagging in a day and age where two deep shell has sort of taken over the National Football League and teams are taking the top away. It really looks like a lot of teams put an emphasis in this free agent period on interior offensive linemen and running backs because they need to reestablish their running games to maybe start to get these safeties to try to start creeping back in the box. The Buffalo Bills went in the opposite direction. They tried to cut some cost on their interior of the offensive line by releasing Mitch Morse, sliding Connor McGovern into center, and giving a very cut rate deal to David Edwards to come in and presumably be your left guard. So if you look at the Buffalo Bills depth chart here along the offensive line, you got two starters set in stone in McGovern and Torrance. You likely have a third starter in Edwards. I think Alec Anderson in August, we could be having a training camp battle conversation, but Alec Anderson looks to be slated into the Ryan Bates role of guard, center, all-purpose type of backup this season. We have Kevin Jarvis waiting in the wings as well, a guy we've been developing for a year on the practice squad. I'll tell you what, in free agency, it wouldn't surprise me if the Buffalo Bills went out and added a veteran interior offensive lineman over the next month or so, but it's not exactly like the names are very much inspiring in terms of someone who's really going to come in here and push the likes of David Edwards. Brian Allen, I think, makes a lot of sense. Former Los Angeles Ram, played with Aaron Cromer. Like David Edwards, has dealt with some injuries that's kept him off the field the last couple of years. So maybe he comes to Buffalo and tries to resuscitate his career. That's a name I would look out for in the next couple of days. And then at offensive tackle, again, if you have such limited resources to spend, Ryan Vandermark, Richard Garage are two homegrown guys that have been developing for a year. I doubt that the Buffalo Bills really put much of an emphasis on adding an offensive tackle in free agency. Maybe Jermaine Ifedi comes back on a one-year deal to add some veteran presence there. And I think maybe Cam Irving is another name to keep an eye on just because he has familiarity with Ronald Curry from their time together in New Orleans. But the position group that I want to focus on here, Gabriel Davis is gone. So the Buffalo Bills have 7 wide receivers under contract. Stephon Diggs and Khalil Shakir are the 2 roster locks. It's pretty likely that Justin Shorter is going to make the roster next season, but who knows? Maybe a guy like Tyrell Shavers gives him a run for his money. I think Andy Isabella and KJ Hamler have a legitimate shot, one or the other, not likely both, to make this roster, filling that Deontay Hardy returner / gadget type of role as well. So the Buffalo Bills are going to need to add some wide receivers to this unit because the numbers are pretty low and outside of the top 2, not very inspiring. Now we've seen in the last hour, Noah Brown has re-signed in Houston. That was probably one of the top 4 guys that we had pegged to the Buffalo Bills, along with Josh Reynolds, Darnell Mooney, and Hollywood Brown. There's also a report from Jeremy Fowler this evening that the Chiefs are really zeroing in and trying to get their hands on Darnell Mooney. We had this conversation earlier this afternoon during our live coverage. Hollywood Brown, Darnell Mooney, they've got sort of that diminutive stature to the point where you're going to probably go draft size in the draft if you sign one of those two guys like Xavier Legette, Keon Coleman, Adonai Mitchell. But maybe the Bills now shift their focus to a Josh Reynolds or a DJ Chark, a boundary receiver with some size that will allow them to really draft any receiver they so choose, including a guy like Xavier Worthy with their pick 28 or their pick in the second round. What are your thoughts on what's left at wide receiver? If you're Brandon Beane, which of these names really stand out and are of interest to you?
I mean, Mooney's of interest for sure. I think given his age, given his trajectory, he's played outside, he's played inside, very dynamic. He would be a nice, I think, fit for the Bills. Donovan Peoples-Jones interests me as like a dart throw. I think that he is kind of like a poor man's Gabe Davis, right? And it looks like he resigned with Detroit. Josh Reynolds is interesting to me because people are going to remember the drops he had in that NFC Championship game against the Niners. But if you watch Josh Reynolds, really the better part of the last couple seasons, he has been really reliable for Jared Goff. As the Lions have waited for Jameson Williams to kind of come back either from injury or from suspensions and things of that nature, Josh Reynolds has kind of been that guy with Amon-Ra St. Brown rounding out that receiving core the last couple years. Obviously the focus this year was on Amon-Ra and Laporta and the up and coming Jameson Williams, but Josh Reynolds kind of gets lost in that mix as being a guy that was pretty reliable and was pretty reliable in LA as well when he was under Sean McVay. So he's an interesting name to me. He would kind of feel a little bit like maybe a better version of the Trent Sherfield signing from a year ago. I wouldn't necessarily expect Josh Reynolds to come in and like we are going to be content with him as the number 2, but I think he would be a more contributing offensive weapon than like a Trent Sherfield signing was a year ago. So that's an interesting name to me.
Donald Peoples-Jones, I just Googled it and I looked on Twitter. I haven't seen it. So someone in the comments section, I think it was Roy, said he resigned in Detroit. I don't think he did because I haven't seen that report. So Donald Peoples-Jones is still available. Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see what the Buffalo Bills do, but I think that they got to add one of these guys, right? Like,
let me just say this about Curtis Samuel too, right? Like, I love Curtis Samuel, but like to me, he's a slot kind of only guy.
Yeah,
and I know people like Curtis Samuel, and I know when he's not injured, by the way, he's battled through some injury. He had a good season last year, but like to me, if you go out and you sign a Curtis Samuel, then the draft, you have to get a boundary guy. Like, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. But I don't know the fit for Curtis Samuel, right, in this offense. I love him as a player. If you want to take snaps away from Khalil Shakir, fine. But like, I just don't see him being like a boundary guy at all in this offense. So I'm not sure about that one.
All my eggs right now are just really in the Marquise Brown, Josh Reynolds, Darnell Mooney basket. I think once those names go off the board, if they don't go to the Buffalo Bills, then I will pivot to DJ Chark. I will pivot to Marquez Valdez-Scantling. I will pivot to Quez Watkins, to KJ Osborne. And then I think if those names go off the board, then I will pivot to Donovan Peoples-Jones. I will pivot to Van Jefferson. I think Van Jefferson could be a cool dart throw. I know maybe he goes back to the Atlanta Falcons now that they have Kirk Cousins, somebody to throw the football. I know he has familiarity with Zach Robinson from their time in Los Angeles, but maybe Van Jefferson is a guy who a week or two from now is still available as well. I like him. Questionable hands, but I like him as a guy, as a dart throw, to be sort of a fourth receiver with a guy we draft. Michael Thomas is another name out there. He's not a natural separator, but he certainly can play on the boundaries. You're definitely going to want to check the medicals on a Michael Thomas, and you'd be very, very thorough in that. He's missed a ton of time. And then somebody has mentioned Laviska Shenault. I'm out on Laviska Shenault. I have no real interest in him. Kind of like Curtis Samuel, I don't really see the fit. I think he's more of a gadget guy than a boundary guy. I think he just takes things away from Khalil Shakir, but Joe Brady does like Yak, and Laviska Shenault could be a guy who contributes Yak. Deontay Johnson and Cortland Sutton are two other names via trade that could be possibly interesting for the Buffalo Bills.
Yeah, we talked about both of these guys earlier. I really like both of them. Sutton, age 30, coming into this season. Obviously, we talked earlier as well about how his touchdown regression came back and he just like totally killed it this year from a touchdown standpoint after only having 2 a year ago. Downfield, high pointer, really, I mean, look at the catch he made against the Bills, right? In that game that we played the Denver Broncos this past year, but down the field threat for Russ all year. He's not a burner, right? Cortland Sutton. He's a big bodied, uses his body to kind of put himself in position to make catches. Now he can run, slant routes and things like that and get his body in position to make nice catches. And he would be a nice option, I think, in a trade. I think we talked about the Jerry Jeudy compensation earlier, another Broncos receiver that was traded to the Browns, a 4th and a 5th for Jerry Jeudy. I don't think Cortland Sutton would cost that much in a trade, maybe a 5th, maybe a 6th. And then you look at Deontay Johnson. Are the Steelers going to be willing to move a guy like that now that they traded or that they signed Russell Wilson? Maybe not, right? Maybe they want to keep that receiving core intact with Deontay Johnson and George Pickens on the opposite side of him. Misconception about Deontay Johnson that he's a slot guy, but he's really not. He's played most of his snaps on the outside in that Pittsburgh offense, so he could definitely play on the outside in this Bills offense. And as a route runner, I think I prefer a Deontay Johnson over a Cortland Sutton, but as a high pointer, and if that's the kind of person you want in your offense, then he would be a complement to like a Stephon Diggs. So both guys would be interesting options. And I don't think maybe Johnson's off the table now. Sutton maybe still on the table, but I don't know what Denver's going to do, right? They got to have somebody for whoever, Jared Stidham or someone to throw the ball to.
And it'll be super interesting, too, to see what's going on in Los Angeles over the next couple of weeks. If they cannot find trading partners, Mike Williams could find his way onto the streets as a free agent. Keenan Allen can find his way onto the streets as a free agent. And on the other side of the ball, Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack could find themselves on the streets as free agents if the Chargers cannot find a trade partner and want to sort of get out of some of those deals. So I put a tweet out there earlier. Trey White, $10 million comes free on June 1st. Could Khalil Mack be this year's Leonard Floyd? That would be an interesting move, I think, for the Buffalo Bills. All right. Before, ladies and gentlemen, we continue, our show, as always, is brought to you by Picasso's Pizza. 4 great locations in Williamsville, West Seneca, Lancaster, and Blaisdell. Buffalo Pizza since 1980. You can order online at picassospizza.net. And if you're an out-of-towner like us, you can even get it mailed to your home. And I can tell you from experience, it is just as good as getting it fresh from the restaurant. Again, that is picassospizza.net. I want to talk a little bit about some of the trends that we saw today, because I think that some of the trends that we saw today are directly sort of indicative of how NFL GMs and NFL front offices view the draft pool. We saw running backs galore go off the board today, including DeAndre Swift to Chicago, Austin Eckler to Washington, Saquon Barkley to Philadelphia, Tony Pollard to Tennessee, Antonio Gibson to New England. The list goes on. A lot of running backs. Gus Bus to the Chargers. And you saw a lot of interior linemen getting paid. Now, I mentioned some of that has to do with wanting to combat all the too deep shells that you are seeing in the National Football League. But I think a lot of it also is indicative of a shallower draft pool along the interior offensive line and at the running back position. I know a lot of people aren't very high on the running back position, but I actually think the Buffalo Bills could possibly get a pretty good running back on day 3 this year. And some guys could fall further than maybe we think, simply because of the way free agency has played out. And it just kind of shows the effect that free agency could have on the draft.
Yeah, free agency looks like it's having a big impact on the draft, I should say, in this case, is having a big impact on free agency. And we see these running backs kind of coming back and getting some money this year. Saquon Barkley, Devin Singletary, even getting some money from the Giants. And so, look, the teams could be looking at this draft class saying, like, none of these guys really excite me that much to where I'll be willing to invest a day 1 or day 2 pick. So I'm going to go out and pay a guy who's still in his 20s to come in and just be that guy for a couple years, 3 years or whatever. What's interesting is, if in all this talk about like the Bills not ever like either spending premium draft capital or signing a premium running back, yes, they drafted James Cook at the end of the second round, but they had spent 3 day 2 picks on running backs in the past 3 to 4 years, right? Between Zach Moss, Devin Singletary, and James Cook. So maybe one of those guys that they would have been tempted to pull the trigger on day 2
Mhm.
is now a day 3 guy that they feel like they get the same value out of had they been wanting to do it on day 2, and they can get a guy that maybe fits into what they want to do as a complement to a James Cook. And there will be guys available,
Mhm.
as we talked about in sort of our
Yeah.
combine review and others, but we'll save that a bit.
It's just super interesting, right? Because like I think Trey Benson will probably be the first running back off the board. Your assumption is that he goes in round 2, but maybe Trey Benson doesn't even come off the board until round 3. The first running back doesn't come off the board until round 3. That could push like legitimately everyone back around. And I think that the idea of that, or the thought that that might be the case, might intrigue a guy like Brandon Beane to be a little bit more patient. Because if we look at the Buffalo Bills depth chart at running back here, they have James Cook. They have Darrington Evans. They need to add bodies. Obviously, the hope from all of Bills Mafia is that Ty Johnson comes back on a 1-year minimal deal. I think at this rate, it's looking like that is something that is a legitimate possibility. But if you're Brandon Beane and you see the way the market went today, I don't know. It might be a while before you can work out a contract with a Zeke Elliott. It might be a while before you can work out a contract with a Kareem Hunt if you were interested, or an Alexander Madison or Deontay Foreman. Or maybe it speeds up the process because all of their other options are gone. Who knows what kind of ripple effect this huge run on running backs had on day 1. The Bills are likely to add a running back in free agency. Chase Edmonds, who's on this list, is now off the board. He re-signed in Tampa Bay. Are there any names there that really intrigue you, and have the rush on running backs today changed your judgment at all as to where the Buffalo Bills should go from here at the running back position?
Well, I'll say this. I don't think that means all of a sudden all of these guys are going to
Mhm.
get more money than we thought they were. I think what you're going to see is a big disparity between what the teams view as really elite level running backs, and we've
Mhm.
seen that this period where I think you see like a Saquon Barkley or a Josh Jacobs, right? Who I think in many people's minds are at or close to that. Like Saquon probably is at that elite level. You could make the case Josh Jacobs is as well, led the league in rushing 2 years ago,
Mhm.
still in their 20s. Those guys are premium talents. Both of those situations for those teams, the Eagles obviously let DeAndre Swift walk. Not going to want to go in the season with Kenny Gainwell or Boston Scott probably as their top back. They're a Super Bowl hopeful. They're going to bring in a guy like Saquon. The Green Bay Packers, Aaron Jones turning 30, battling injuries. They were a surprise team to many, but Jordan Love looks to be a rising star. They're going to put a guy like Josh Jacobs, who is an absolute menace, running the ball between the tackles to bring in for that. So like
Mhm.
it depends on situation. I don't think any of these other guys you had on the list are gonna like all of a sudden get more money than we expected because of that. I like Zeke Elliott on that list just for what
Yeah.
he did last year. He's still fairly young in his late 20s. Showed that he's still got some juice with the Patriots last year on an abysmal
Mhm.
situation on that Patriots offense. We know how good he is in pass protection. They don't need him to be a speed type of guy. They need him to be in between the tackles, nose for the first down, nose for the goal line type of guy, and he is that guy still.
Mhm.
Clyde Edwards-Helaire is the interesting name because of obviously the experience with Joe Brady. But to me, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, I don't know. He just feels like he would be kind of not so much a compliment to James Cook. He's obviously got the pass catching ability, but
Mhm.
is he going to be the guy to get you the tough yardage? I don't know. Zeke intrigues me the most out of
Yeah.
the names on that list, and I think there's a couple people who said that as well in the comment section.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, for me, and someone said like, how much money would these guys get? Some of them, like DJ Dallas or Ty Johnson, it's gonna be the vet minimum,
Minimums,
whatever
minimums.
the vet minimum is for their position. But for a guy like Zeke or Kareem Hunt, like $2-3 million, like for 1 year, one contract, I think that's about where they're going to be when the dust settles. That'll be a little bit below, I think, what they made last season, or at least what Zeke made last season. I think Kareem Hunt um, made right around or just over the vet minimum last year. So to me, give me Zeke and Ty Johnson in a draft pick, or uh give me, I'm blanking here, Kareem Hunt, Ty Johnson, or a draft pick, or give me Ty Johnson, DJ Dallas, or a draft pick. Those are like sort of the guys that I'm zeroing in on. We had this conversation during the live. I don't think Aaron Jones is going to want to come here and split a backfield with James Cook. I think he'll look to a place like Houston to possibly go. And Derrick Henry, I don't think he's going to want to come to a place where in the crunch time, in the clutch time, in December, in January, the team needs a yard. They're not going to Derrick Henry. They're going to be going to Josh Allen. And I don't think you want to take the ball out of Josh Allen's hands in those situations. So I would go with a no for Derrick Henry. Now, if he wanted to come here and he was willing to take a nothing deal, go for it.
I mean, that's the thing, right? And we said this earlier today. Like, I'm not gonna go there. I just like if he signs, like, of course, I'll be happy. Like, that'll be great. Obviously, he's a compliment to the style of James Cook, right? We saw with what like Derrick Henry and Tajay Spears did as compliments to each other last year. I think James Cook is a more all-around runner than Tajay Spears, so I don't necessarily know that it's like a thunder and lightning situation. Derrick Henry would be coming here to be a goal line, short yardage. I mean, I just don't know, right? Like he would probably do more than that just because he is Derrick Henry and he still, I think, does have some juice left. But like that can't be, I think, a priority for the Bills when it comes to asset allocation, right? DJ Dallas, interesting, vet minimum, gives you returnability. Some of those guys would be interesting. I think it comes down to dollars, as you mentioned, for a guy like Derrick Henry. And the longer these guys sit out on the market, obviously, the better that is. If the Bills truly are interested in bringing in a running back, but at the end of the day, like I'm okay if you want to bring back Ty Johnson at some point and then kind of figure it out from there and just have Ty Johnson, James Cook, and Darrington Evans until you go into the draft. I'm kind of okay with that.
I'm fine with that too, because honestly, like Kareem Hunt didn't sign till what, mid-season this year? Like
Right.
there are going to be dudes that you can get. There are going to be dudes.
Leonard Fournette, same way last year.
You could still have Leonard Fournette. Apparently, according to Jordan Poyer's brother, he hates Brandon Beane, so maybe not. But who knows? On to the Buffalo Bills' biggest remaining needs. There are two positions we haven't touched on yet. We got to touch on because they are important. The first is the interior of the defensive line. The Bills literally still have two interior defensive linemen under contract in Ed Oliver and Elianku. None of their free agents have signed anywhere yet, to my knowledge. Daquan Jones, Tim Settle, Jordan Phillips, Linval Joseph, Poona Ford. Some defensive tackles have gone off the market today, maybe not some of the ones that you were expecting. A lot of guys that were on the cover one free agent list, that were on our free agent list, are still available. Those names include Montravius Adams, Roquan Davis, Austin Johnson, Benito Jones, Javon Kinlaw, Sebastian Joseph Day, Malcolm Roach, Sheldon Rankins, Ashawn Robinson, Tierre Tart, and Quentin Jefferson. If any of the guys have signed in the last hour, please let me know because I missed it. But to me, this is one where the Buffalo Bills are just going to sit back and wait, because the longer they wait, the cheaper these guys get. And there are still a lot of quality names remaining.
Yeah, and this is when you asked me earlier today, like, where would I prioritize? And as the edge players were coming off the board, that was at a time where I was pretty, not confident that we were going to get AJ Epinesa back. And sure enough, we did. So now I feel like pretty good in the situation the Bills are in, knowing that we have to add a ton of guys to this defensive line, even probably before the draft, right? To give ourselves just the bodies we need to fill out this roster. There are a lot of good interior guys still left. Obviously, I think we all hope that the Bills do bring back Daquan Jones, but I think even if the Bills do bring back Daquan Jones, you should still look for another one of those guys potentially to bring in as well, whether it's a Joseph Day. I like Malcolm Roach a lot. There are some good names still out there in the interior, so would not hate a double dip in free agency at the interior, especially given that the guys that you would want to come in, the guys that profile as a true Daquan Jones replacement in the draft, there's really only a handful. And there's a lot of good guys I like, but are you really going to expect like a Dwayne Carter, who could probably be maybe a day 2 pick, or a guy like that to come in and be a starter day 1? No, I don't think so.
Yeah.
So you're going to need to do something here in free agency if you're the Bills.
My dream right now, and I mentioned this on the live, the days whittle away in free agency, the days whittle away. We can get Daquan Jones and Sheldon Rankins. That would be like that combo, or even Malcolm Roach and Sheldon. Anyone in Sheldon Rankins really is any combo of a one tech and Sheldon Rankins. Because if you can have Sheldon Rankins and Ed Oliver on one side, you can have Daquan Jones or any of those other one techs that we mentioned, Malcolm Roach, Austin Johnson, etc. on the other. And then you can draft a guy in the first 4 rounds, maybe add Dwayne Carter, maybe add Mason Smith, maybe add Chris Jenkins, maybe add, who knows, whatever the defensive tackle is, right? Gabe Hall, right? You now have 4 dudes, right? One of them is a rookie, one of them super young, and Oliver's still super young. And then you have the 2 wily vets in a guy like Sheldon Rankins and a guy like Daquan Jones. That's a really good combo, a really good mix of youth and veteran leadership. I think that's a really good interior, pass rushers, guys who can create for the guys in front of them, Terrell Bernard and Matt Milano, guys who can create for the guys on the edges, AJ Epinesa and Groot, because AJ Epinesa and Groot, they're not true pass rushers, right? Like at the end of the day, like they're more cleanup artists than they are true Von Miller-esque, right? Edge rushers. I think we all know that. I think we all realize that. So to me, a rookie, a Sheldon Rankins type, a Daquan Jones type, and Ed Oliver, that's chef kiss to me. It might take us 2 weeks to get there, 2-3 weeks to get there though.
Yeah, but you know what? This is where it's gonna, as Brandon Beane said, he's not a patient guy. He's gonna test his patience. And guess what? He was patient last year, and it really paid off for him, right?
Yeah.
He was patient with signing Taylor Rapp, and Taylor Rapp became really important to the team down the stretch as we faced injuries. And Leonard Floyd was maybe the best signing the Bills made outside of Connor McGovern last year. And he was patient with that one, right? Saw the market, saw there were edge guys available, veteran edge guys available, and he waited and waited. That could be the case for an interior defensive line this year. Be patient, wait and wait, see what you can get. Now, the difference being last year you had the ability to be patient at the edge because you had Von Miller, who obviously was coming back, and you knew at some point he'd be back, but you had Epinesa and Groot already, right? This year with interior, you really don't have anybody at the moment. So it's going to be an art for him as to figure out where he's going to kind of like poach in and maybe grab someone, or if he's going to be patient. But I think there needs to be maybe a little bit more urgency than he was like waiting until like 4 or 5 weeks like it was for Leonard Floyd last year. Maybe this week we'll see something, hopefully, at defensive tackle.
The next move that I want to see get done, the next move I want to see the Bills make, I want to see them announce it at midnight tonight. The second we log off, I want to see them announce it, right? Or preferably before we log off, announce it, or tomorrow morning. This is the next move that I want to see the Buffalo Bills make. In that regards, our other biggest need right now, and that is safety. We have 4 under contract: Taylor Rapp, Cam Lewis, Kendall Williamson, Damar Hamlin. 2 free agents, Jordan Poyer, Micah Hyde. Neither are returning to Buffalo. A lot of safeties came off the market today. Xavier McKinney got himself paid. But then there was sort of these guys like Alohi Gilman. I'm sorry, Dave. I'm sorry for your guy, Alohi. But Brandon Jones, they get these like 3-year, $21 million deals. Geno Stone, they're coming in around $7.5 million AAV. And these are guys who were on Darnell Savage too. We're on their rookie deals. We're coming off their rookie deals. They're just hitting their prime. They're just hitting their stride. There are some guys that still fit that description. Jeremy Chin and Ashton Davis and Julian Blackman are the 3 names I think that fit that mold. Cam Curl, probably going to get a little bit more money. Mike Edwards, probably going to get a little bit less money. And then there's the wild card. The icing on top, the Brandon Beane move to me would be to go out and get a guy like Justin freaking Simmons. But the first 6 guys I have on that list, Cam Curl, Jeremy Chin, Ashton Davis, Mike Edwards, Justin Simmons, Julian Blackman, go get it done, Brandon Beane. Your next move needs to be one of those 6 guys.
The safety market has been interesting today. We saw McKinney get a huge bag, but then you see guys like Gilman, morning for him. He only gets a 2-year, $11 million deal. You see Bayard getting the $7.5 million. You see a guy like Geno Stone only getting like a 2-year, $12 million deal. So I feel pretty good that Brandon Beane can get a guy in that sort of $5 to $7 million AAV range and get a really solid player. If he wants to go out and maybe try to push that to closer to a $10 million range, that's probably what it's going to take or more to get a guy like Simmons. But that $5 to $7 range seems pretty sweet right now. Maybe even 4 to 7 range if you can get a guy like Chin or Blackman. Blackman 4 interceptions last year,
Mhm.
his best season as a pro. Not a great year for him to become a free agent because of how many safeties are available, but he's a really good player. And Ashton Davis, I think, is a wild card as well. When he hasn't been injured,
Mhm.
he's been a good player, a good center fielder, good in coverage. The cover 1-1 pass free agent scouting report had a really nice write up on Ashton Davis as a possible option. So there's a lot of names still out there at safety. Could you see a move at safety tonight? I would like to. I would like to see a move at safety either tonight or tomorrow. I think
Mhm.
this is one of those where I wouldn't necessarily play chicken with, just because there's a lot of guys out there. I think, yes, you signed Taylor Rapp. There's always the draft. I get that. But to me, how important this position has been to the Bills over the past several years with Hyde and Poyer, when those guys hadn't been in the lineup, we saw how much of a detriment it was. And even when they were battling through injuries, we saw how much of a detriment it was for them to
Mhm.
not be 100%. And I think it's naive to think that you can just go out and find 2 more guys just like that who are going to be diamonds in the rough just because you found 2 diamonds in the rough before. I'm not saying that the coaches can't
Mhm.
get the most out of a safety that they do bring in, but I do think that it's a little naive to think that you can get 2 more diamonds in the rough. I would be okay, at least for one of the positions, and in this case, more of that center fielding type, like an Ashton Davis, like a Blackman, go out and get
Mhm.
your free safety for the next 3 to 4 years, and then all pressure's off when it comes to the draft. So that's me. I'd like to see that. If that's not the case, I'd be really pushing hard for a guy like Javon Bullard in the draft.
Oh yeah, I mean, even if we get one of these guys, I still want to add that third. And what's nice about Javon Bullard and Tyke Smith, and even a guy like Dadrion Taylor Demerson, Cam Lewis might be good backup nickel corner for a game, but if something were to happen to Tehran, I would love Javon Bullard to be there to insert into that slot role. Kind of like Brian Branch played the nickel for Detroit this year, right? I would love Tyke Smith. I feel like he could be a good nickel. I feel like Dadrion Taylor Demerson could also fit in that role as well. So not only to be a developmental safety behind Taylor Rapp and behind whoever we sign, but also to be that backup nickel too, because we know how important nickel is to that defense. So that is something to keep an eye on as well. Looking at the last 2 real important position groups for the Buffalo Bills, still keeping an eye on Tyrell Dodson. The Buffalo Bills have their top 4, I think, linebackers set for next season, but I think they would be willing to bring Tyrell Dodson back if the market doesn't sort of heat up for him. The name, in my opinion, to keep an eye out for is Shaq Quarterman. He had a pre-draft visit with the Buffalo Bills 4 seasons ago. I think the Buffalo Bills could zero in on him if they can't get something done with Tyrell Dodson. And at cornerback, Dane Jackson. I think we both agreed on our live this afternoon. He's a guy we would like to see the Buffalo Bills retain as depth. But if they don't, guys like Darnay Holmes, you mentioned in our live earlier the importance of having a backup nickel. A guy like Darnay Holmes, who the Bills are rumored to have some interest in, could be an option, as well as a reunion with a guy like Levi Wallace or Nick McLeod. I know a lot of fans don't want to hear names like Levi Wallace and stuff, but it's just quality depth, and the Buffalo Bills will add competition on day 3 of the draft. And if those day 3 guys light it up like the Nick McLeods have in years past, or we draft a guy in the 7th round like that slipped, like an Alex Austin, a guy like Levi Wallace doesn't preclude you from just straight up releasing them to keep that younger player who outperformed, unlike previous years where we've lost guys like Alex Austin and Nick McLeod. So I think that is important to keep in mind as well. All right. Looking around the AFC East, I wanted to do that a little bit before we left here. It
Mhm.
was not a great day for the Miami Dolphins. They've rebounded late, but I haven't honestly liked their signings that much. Jordan Brooks, they gave about 10 million AAV2 to come play middle linebacker. He's a good solid middle linebacker. Aaron Brewer, a good run blocking center, but not the greatest pass blocking center in the world. So that's probably going to kick Liam Eichenberg to guard. The Miami Dolphins lost a ton of talent today, including Christian Wilkins. They've already lost Xavier Howard. They've already lost Jerome Baker. They lost Andrew Van Ginkel. They've lost a ton. There are a ton of holes on this Miami Dolphins team. A lot of things that they need to replace. Robert Hunt is another name that they lost today as well. The Dolphins did not have the greatest day. We joked earlier on the live, right? Everyone wants to joke about the Bills window closing. The Miami Dolphins still haven't even paid Tua yet, and it looks like their window is closing.
Yeah, and I mean, I think comparing the two teams is a little bit, that seems like a surface level type of comparison right there, right? I think the Dolphins still have to get under the cap. They've lost premium talent at their prime or going into their prime. Brandon Jones, Wilkins. I mean, these are guys that are cornerstone type players. Maybe not Brandon Jones, but he's still a very good safety and a guy that maybe we wanted from the Bills' perspective to come in and replace Mike Hyde. But the Bills have lost and cut guys that are it's that old cliche, like cut a guy a year early before it's too late, and that's probably what they ended up doing with Mitch Morse and Jordan Poyer, right? Trey White, obviously, that's a big one. That's a risk, obviously, calculated risk Brandon Beane took, thinking like, I don't know if we're going to get back to the level of play that we've seen from Trey White. Our corner room is already in decent shape. Cutting a guy like that as post June 1, while sentimental and has us in the feels, from a football standpoint, I can understand it. And then other guys like Deontay Hardy and Nyheim Hines, those guys aren't moving the needle as far as like shaping the true future of your franchise. So it's really not a comparable to these two, to compare the Dolphins and the Bills, right? The Bills' entire offense outside of Mitch Morse really is intact, minus Gabriel Davis, right? And so they still have pretty much everything they need. Obviously, safety and defensive line have become the priority now for the Bills. We'll see where they kind of slot in receiver. But yeah, the Dolphins, I mean, Dolphins fans were quite quiet on Twitter today, and we know they like to chirp. So it was kind of nice to see, in a way, that the Dolphins going through that pain, especially because of how chirpy they were during the season, right? For the Jets and Pats, it's just like they're in purgatory now.
Yeah.
They stink like whatever. But the Dolphins, especially, it was satisfying.
The Jets really haven't done much. The Jets literally have done nothing today, right? And they still have holes at wide receiver. They have holes along their offensive line. They have holes along their defensive interior. They have some holes at safety they need to patch. And there looks like they're just going to use draft picks to go about trying to do it. If the Jets were to make a move, the Jets were to make a splash, the rumor is David Bakhtiari, because Aaron Rodgers gets what Aaron Rodgers wants, might be going and protecting the blind side there in New York. The Patriots spent most of their day today re-signing guys. Kendrick Bourne back in the fold, Hunter Henry back in the fold. They just signed Jalen Reagor. Michael Onwenu re-signs in New England as well. And now they added a couple of new names. Jacoby Brissett, likely to be the starting quarterback for the New England Patriots next year if they do not start whatever rookie they draft at pick number 3. He's got obviously experience in New England, and he's got experience with Alex Van Pelt from their time in Cleveland. That's a good fit there. I'm happy for Jacoby Brissett because I like Jacoby Brissett, and I actually think that's a legitimately good landing spot for him. It sucks that I have to root against him because he's in the AFC East, but I think that's the best spot he could have landed. And then on top of that, they added Antonio Gibson today to go along with Ramondre Stevenson. They gave him a pretty nice little mid-size contract as well. So New England keeping some of their cornerstone guys while at the same time adding a couple of guys. I think it'll be a slow off season for New England this year. They're going to utilize the draft, and then they're just going to see what they have this next season, and then they're going to go from there. So they're probably still a couple of years away from being a threat, but they're not being silly like Bill Belichick was a couple of off seasons ago.
No, I think New England is fairly self-aware of their situation right now. That's kind of the way I would describe it. Like, yep, they're going to bring in a couple guys to kind of bridge the gap here. Antonio Gibson, as a complementing pass catching back to Ramondre, although Ramondre can do that as well. But Ramondre's come out and said, hey, I want to be the bell cow this year. That may work well for a guy like Antonio Gibson, who's really kind of been a complimentary back his entire career as that pass catching guy, 2-minute kind of guy. Certainly signals, or at least appears to signal, that Zeke will not be back in New England. And really, like, re-upping Kendrick Bourne, that's a move for the future for them as well, saying, hey, look, we are not going to necessarily expect anything from him, maybe even this whole entire season, or at least the first half of the season. That's a future-looking move. And then obviously Brissett is just going to be a bridge to whoever they decide to do at quarterback now that Mac Jones has been shipped off to Jacksonville. So yeah, it'll be a pivot year, I think, for New England, especially under a new head coach. I think this year will probably be a wash for them. We'll see how competitive they are, if they kind of play hard for Jared Mayo, and we'll just kind of see. But nothing too crazy for New England, I would say.
All right, Dave, you put a comment out here in the comment section. Losing Hunt and Wilkins in the trenches has got to sting. Sorry about it, Miami. That's probably my favorite part of today, is just how much the Miami Dolphins lost, especially in the trenches. I think that's probably my biggest takeaway from today. Brandon Beane spoke about it at his press conference. When we sit down and we try to figure out how to construct our football team, the first thing we think about is, how do we win our division? And our division got worse today. Our division got worse today. The people we play against in our division, they got worse today. The biggest threat to the Bills in the AFC East got worse today. So I'm a big fan of that. That's probably the best thing that happened to me today, was just watching sad Dolphins fans as this unfolded. Before we head out of here, what is your prediction for the Buffalo Bills' next move?
Next move? Ooh. I think next move is a Daquan Jones re-sign. I think that's the next move, but I think between tonight and the end of the day tomorrow, we will see a Daquan Jones re-sign, and the Bills will sign another player of note on the defensive side. I don't know. Safety would be my preference.
Yeah, I'm going to go with, I think the Buffalo Bills' next move will be signing a safety. You know what? At first I was going to be generic and I was going to be bland. I would prefer the Buffalo Bills go with a younger guy, like a Blackman, like a Chin. I think they go Justin Simmons.
Yes.
I think Justin Simmons is the Bills' next move. I think that's what they got cooking. I think you're going to have Justin
from
Simmons
Brian.
and
Taron Johnson extension. That could be a sneaky next move.
That might be necessary in order to sign a guy like Justin Simmons too. So I like that. We got a couple people coming in. Derrick Henry, Darnell Mooney of the Chiefs is something we could see tomorrow. So thank you guys so much for joining us here. I'm going to go and I'm going to leave. I'm going to go to bed. And the second I go to bed, the Bills are going to make a move and I'll wake up to it tomorrow morning.
Yeah, definitely.
Our plan for the rest of this week is, this is the last show we have. If we have time in our schedules and the Bills make some moves, we might record something and post it both on our podcast feed and here on YouTube. But this will be up for us this week. But you guys have a full plethora of shows. You have Under Review tomorrow. You have Disguised Coverage tomorrow. You have Film Room on Wednesday. You have Aaron and Greg on Wednesday. You have Tom DeLoss on Thursday. So you have a whole bunch of people bringing you through the rest of the week here at Cover One, keeping you guys up to date, giving you guys all the information you need, and reacting as the Buffalo Bills maneuver their way through free agency. We will be back next Monday. Obviously, we'll react to anything the Bills do between now and then, but we are now getting into draft mode. So we will be, and this is going to be one, I think, my favorite podcast this is going to be my favorite podcast this offseason. We are tiering the wide receivers next week. We are going to sit down and we are going to figure out what wide receivers we want to target in which rounds. We are going to stack our wide receiver board for the Buffalo Bills. We are going to do that next Monday. I'm looking forward to it. Join us 9 p.m. Eastern time. Dave, any final thoughts before we head out here this evening?
No, I think people rightfully asking in the comments section, what's the Bills cap situation at right about now? I think as of before we went on this show, they hadn't really updated. Spot Track hadn't had the Dion Dawkins.
A lot of moving parts.
I think if you want to roughly kind of estimate between the Josh Allen restructure and the Dawkins extension plus the Epinesa signing, I would say the Bills are somewhere between, if I had to guess, roughly between $6 and $10 million in cap space at the moment would be my rough guess. But again, we don't know exactly until the official structures of these contracts come out as to what that might look like. So that would be my guess, is I think they have a little room to play with, but another extension here, maybe for Taron Johnson.
Kicking the can down on Ed Oliver with a restructure there. Stephon Diggs. If you want to go out and get another marquee name, you might have to kick the can down the road and guarantee some money into the future for Stephon Diggs.
Yeah, and the fact that they didn't restructure all of what they could have with Josh Allen's
Mhm.
2024 number, which is kind of interesting, given obviously he is the franchise, maybe tells you that the Bills are trying to avoid as much can kicking as possible,
Yep.
and trying to maybe sneak one more, we'll call it like
We're just using
mid-tier
all 11 draft
signing.
picks, baby.
Yep, maybe. So
There will
that's
be
it.
no free
And
agents to react to this offseason. It'll be the next free agent we will be reacting to is an undrafted free agent.
so
All
we'll
right.
see. We'll see. And thanks everyone for joining tonight.
Yeah.
We had great numbers tonight. And obviously, thanks to you, Judge, for today. Been on pretty much on here since noon. So
It was a lot of
congrats to
fun. I
you.
enjoyed it. Thank you for bailing me out a couple of times. I might not have made it the full 6 hours without you helping me out there. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, man. Of course.
All right, ladies and gentlemen. Next up here on Cover One is the Under Review podcast, which will be kicking off tomorrow night at 7:00 with Joe DeRosa. You're not going to want to miss that. And until next time, go Bills.
Go Bills.
Thank you for watching tonight's episode of the Air Raid Hour. Make sure to hit that like button on the way out. If you are catching the show on demand, leave a reply in the comments section and we will respond over the course of the week. You can always listen to every episode next day on all major podcasting platforms, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify, by searching Air Raid Buffalo. Thank you for your continued support, and as always, go Bills!